Hello, welcome back to RPMbassy. My name is Mark. Today I'm going to be doing a video on the Twin Peaks original soundtrack by Angelo Badalamenti. So this is one that I thought I'd done in the past, but I haven't. Much like the previous videos I've done, I seem to sort of forget what I haven't done. So this is, I mean, has anybody not heard of Twin Peaks? It's kind of like, it's a cult phenomena, but at this point I feel like it's so popular that it's gone from the alternative to being the norm, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, like thematically it's a little bit odd and it's a little bit weird, but it is a fantastic show. And you know, most people that I know have either watched it or are certainly very aware of it. So I wouldn't say that it's really in the sort of cult position anymore. It's kind of just like, it's just highly regarded, you know? And certainly a lot of it has to do with the score. Musically, this is a phenomenal piece of work, but also quite a simple one that I realized on re-listening to this. It's actually a very efficient score. The sort of, the breadth of tracks you have on here is quite small, actually. There's sort of fairly similar themes and motifs that go throughout the record, which you kind of condenses it down quite a lot, and you've got lots of recurring sounds and lots of callbacks to different songs. So it's actually not as broad a piece of work as I would have thought, but then I guess, you know, it's, as I said, it's a thematic sort of thing, so it's there to kind of get you in the mood for the show itself. You know, it's not meant to be the main event, even though certainly at least in one case with the Laura Palmer's theme, it really is the main event. So released in September of 1990, around the same time of the show, I believe. This was a pretty well received record. I believe it got to 25 in the Billboard charts, which is wild for a soundtrack. You know, certainly comparatively to these days, like soundtracks don't really do that. But yeah, this is a really just like classic record that I kind of think everyone who's kind of into vinyl will at some point or another pick up. It's sort of it's sort of synonymous in terms of the vibe and the feelings of vinyl. It kind of fits right in with the kind of like the weird jazzy eclectic sound that you've got going on with this record. You know, it makes sense to have this in sort of any record collection, to be honest. So obviously the show itself, it's sort of a weird psychological supernatural thriller kind of thing. You know, most people at least roughly know what it's about, even if you haven't seen it, and if you haven't, I do recommend checking it out. It is a good show. The music itself really, you know, it does kind of sit so perfectly in the mood and the feel of Twin Peaks, and the way the town is sort of portrayed. The music goes alongside it. It's slightly off kilter. You know, it's set at the time what would have been a contemporary era. It's set in the present day, so to speak, of 1990, and yet the music itself is very much a callback to sort of like jazz bars and things like that, like very early sort of music venue kind of sounds and stuff. And you've got some eclectic mixes on here, as I say. So we'll just sort of kind of go through the start to finish and just chat a little bit about individual tracks. And so the opening track, Twin Peaks theme, this is the instrumental version of Falling by Julie Cruz. That also appears on the album. That's the final track. So it's a nice way to kind of start and finish the album with the same song, essentially. You know, I think even someone who isn't familiar with Twin Peaks whatsoever, the theme itself is something that everybody knows. That, you know, classical kind of synth paddy kind of feeling, what I would assume is a baritone guitar. Certainly it's tuned to sort of like a B or a B flat or something like that. So I mean, it could be bass, but tonality for me suggests that it's a baritone guitar, which again would kind of make sense with that sort of like the era that it's evoking. That, you know, when you pair it with the show itself, with the intro visuals and the sort of the nature and the steel works and all of that sort of stuff, it truly is it's phenomenal. The kind of hope that intro theme gives you, it really does kind of set the mood. It's got a real melancholy to it, and it kind of personifies the feeling of the town in a way. It's very, very well done. Second track on here, Laura Palmer's theme. I mean, really, this is the main event of the entire soundtrack, and you know, it gets called back to a lot throughout the soundtrack as well with those motifs that I mentioned. This song in particular, if you haven't seen it, I do recommend, literally, if you just search Angelo Badalamenti on YouTube, chances are it'll be the first result. It's a video of him on Fender Rhodes, just showing how he went about composing it with David Lynch sat next to him. And I mean, it's probably one of the best videos to sort of talk about like composition and music and scoring, and how, you know, it all comes down to emotion essentially. It's a phenomenal video. It's like 4.5 minutes long, so you know, definitely check it out. That video kind of personifies what I feel about this theme. It is such a well put together theme, but also it's not clinical, it's not overanalyzed. You know, the way that it's presented in the sort of video talking about the composition is that it was essentially Angelo and David Lynch sat next to each other, Angelo playing piano based on David Lynch's prompts of how it should feel and how it should sound, and sort of evoking imagery. And the way that it comes together, at least in his words, you know, it certainly does seem possible that it is a song that they essentially put together in about 10 minutes. And at the end, Lynch says to Angelo, like, don't change a thing. Which, yeah, it sounds accurate to me. Like, there's bits and pieces in the song where, like, you know, I think if you overanalyzed it and went back to quote unquote fix the song and spend more time on production and arrangement, potentially would change. But those kind of quirks make for a really, really interesting track in the end. And again, I think it's a song that, even if you're not familiar with the work itself, that song is probably familiar to you in some way, shape or form, you know, as with the intro song. Other ones on here, you've got things like Audrey's Dance, Freshly Squeezed, and Dance of the Dream Man. So they are some very jazzy tracks. There's a lot of sort of back and forth between synthy and electric piano based tracks, and then these jazzy tracks where the brushed snare is like obscene. Like Audrey's Dance and Dance of the Dream Man in particular, the brush snare, it almost takes over the mix, like it's like all the way through the song. But again, it kind of has that vibe that sort of fits kind of a jazz bar, and it's got a very like moody feel to it, very smoky feel to it. Those have kind of like themes that sort of go back and forth like that. They're not the same, but they've got that sort of curiosity to them. There's a level of intrigue to how they're put together. And in a way, between those, the sort of the main theme, Laura Palmer's theme, and the sort of two dance, you know, Audrey's Dance and Dance of the Dream Man themes, you've kind of almost got the entire soundtrack in a nutshell. Like the motifs that are in those, other tracks have all of those. So other ones on here, you've got the Bookhouse Boys, which is a really, really cool track. In terms of like the mixing choices, it's quite chaotic. You sort of layer loads of different parts of other tracks on it towards the end, and it gets almost messy, but it's kind of, again, in terms of the fit with the television show, the way that it pieces and sits in with the show itself, like narratively, so many of these tracks are so well put together, and I think that's probably why it's made such a great score and soundtrack in particular, even outside of it musically being great to listen to. The way that it actually sits narratively, like it's almost like a character in its own right with the show, which like that is a compositional achievement in its own right, you know. Other tracks on here that I really want to mention, Love Theme from Twin Peaks. It says Love Theme. It is literally Laura Palmer's theme. It's like identical in terms of composition, and it's slightly more down tempo, slightly more relaxed, but it's the same track near enough. And again, it's like such a clever way of kind of piecing together the story of this show, almost like, you know, Laura Palmer's theme, this melancholic, you know, really upsetting track in a way. Like there's a very faint glimmer of hope, but it's a very, very sad track in the grand scheme of things. And then to call what is essentially the same track the Love Theme, it kind of really highlights the sort of the themes of love and relationships in this show. Like there's no one who's really happy in what they're doing. Like even people who are like happy with the relationships, there's always something underneath that isn't quite right. And like it just, I think that's what this captures really well. It's just like that uncanny narrative. You know, it all sounds excellent. All the music is excellent. On the surface, it's perfect. But then you kind of listen a little bit harder, you delve a bit deeper, you know, you get to something like the Bookhouse Boys, and there's something not 100% right with it in a good way. It really is just such a cleverly put together soundtrack, and as I said, really efficient. The fact that you've got, you know, basically 3-4 motifs that go through this score in particular, wow, what a well-made piece of work. Like I think perhaps it doesn't get enough appreciation on that perspective. You know, the whole thing, the show, the production as a whole, just how well made it is. Obviously, people love it because of things like, oh, damn good coffee and that sort of stuff. But actually, like the love and the passion that would have gone into this, and just the way that the feeling is evoked from this, it truly is one of the most impressive soundtracks, at least for my money. In terms of money, as far as picking a copy of this up, there are several different versions. Obviously, there's the original version. There's a Mondo re-released version or reissued version, which I believe comes with like is it a red stain? I think there's a couple of different coloured vinyl versions. There's one that's like a coffee brown, which I kind of get, like, you know, cool idea and everything, but I think perhaps you know, I wouldn't have instantly drawn the comparison. I think perhaps they lent a little bit too much into the meme with that. The first thing I think of when I think of Twin Peaks isn't the coffee. I know that's a popular thing, but it's not what I first think of. And then there's a couple of different versions like this one. This is just a regular black vinyl, nothing sort of uber special about that. But definitely do pick it up. I'd say you could probably just get away with picking up any of the copies. I don't think there's a huge amount of like remastering or anything going on with any of the versions. So, you know, just grab whichever. And also the sound of it, the tonality of it, I don't think it needs remastering. You know, you can remaster things like the Beatles and stuff like that, where you kind of take it from being a straight mono track and at least expanding the instruments out. But everything, you know, this kind of like had already been at the ceiling anyway. You don't need to make it any more poppy or glassy or any sort of other you know, vague production terms I can think of. So yeah, pick it up. Definitely do grab it. Like, if you haven't seen the show, watch the show. It's pretty phenomenal. And while, yeah, you know, there's critique about how certain things were revealed and how the sort of, certainly the second season was written, particularly when you look at the sort of drop off in viewership and its subsequent cancellation. But if you're willing to watch it, definitely give it a shot. You know, just give it the time of day. Give this a listen. Give the film a watch. Give the third series a watch. You know, just appreciate the piece of work that this is and the effort and the love that's gone into it. And yeah, as I say, I think as a soundtrack, it really does stand out as one of the greats.